Welcome back to Rocky Mountain Residential, a podcast by MCM Collective. I'm Kelly McBartlett, and today we have a really interesting topic that doesn't get discussed a lot in our industry. And I'll turn it over to you, Blake.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Blake McBartlett. And yeah, let's just start off with tell us a little about yourselves and your practice.
Sure. So I'm Lindsay. This is Ben. We are the owners and therapists at Evolve Counseling Services here in Fort Collins. And we actually met back in the day in our clinical counseling program.
Very romantic. Not a patient, right? Yeah, and not patients. Yeah.
It's debatable. But we kind of hit it off. And after we graduated, we started dating and eventually got married. So throughout the course of our relationship, we have worked in a variety of clinical settings. We've done things like outpatient therapy. We've been in treatment centers. We've been in hospitals. So we have a lot of clinical experience through those that variety of settings. And we decided to move toward private practice several years ago. And so we went ahead and proceeded with setting up our private practice and have really enjoyed that work. So at Evolve, we specialize in helping people with depression and anxiety, and we provide individual therapy to folks that are 16 years old and up. And we operate from a CBT perspective, so cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a really solid evidence-based modality and seems to be helpful for a lot of people. So that's just a little bit about us.
Awesome. Ben, same thing, same focus, same area?
Yep, very much. We really want to develop like a cohesive focus as a practice. Like this is what we do, this is what we specialize in. Sometimes one of the troubles that people run into when they're picking a therapist is like they're looking at like psychology today and it's like, oh, this person does everything. Like, and it's hard to pick. So we want people to know like what we do and that they're in the right place.
Awesome. You said you focus on CBT?
Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy applied to folks with depression and anxiety primarily.
Perfect. Well, we're kind of taking a unique approach of like buying and selling because it is a big deal, sometimes filled with lots of emotions. So thank you for being here today and kind of bringing your lens to the conversation. So oftentimes we refer to the D's in real estate and not talking about those D's. We're focusing on diapers, divorce, death, diamonds, kind of like really highs and lows of real estate. So how do you think therapy or being in tune with like you as a person would be helpful when going through these home purchase or sell?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for clarifying what we were talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny. We were thinking about this, a little bit in advance for today, and something that came to mind. It's kind of famous. You may see it floating around the internet from time to time, but it is it's a life stressor scale. It's a rank order of like 40 common things that people go through, and I think it's by Holmes and Rahe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you care to Google it, but really quick, everything that you name there, all of these D's, all of these things, they're all on there, and a lot of things that are even things beyond those big ones are on there, right? Like things like if you're if someone's starting work, ending work, if someone's moving for a job, if you're dissolving your community because you're moving. So I think I was looking at it, and there's like around like 15 things hit on this stressor scale. So it is a big deal. It is one of the bigger things that people go through. Moving itself is on there. So I guess to answer your question, like how does this really, relate to therapy? How could therapy support this, or just having yourself in good order? Really, therapy works in a lot of ways, like, subtle and more obvious. I think therapy's kind of most famous for like, you can come in there and like bleed off some emotion, right? Like you want this to go out and, stay in a place, with your therapist. So it's not kind of coming into the room at closing day or when you're making decisions. Therapy maybe is a little lesser known, but I would say all the more important of like just providing skills, right? It's skills and insights of patterns, right? If you understand how your patterns play out around stress, well, you have the opportunity to intervene, right? And have them play out differently. And there are very learnable skills that you can take with you for life from therapy. These are things that help you, regulate your nervous system, think, in a more helpful way about what's going on. And yeah, I would say, please chime in if I'm missing anything, but that's really how therapy could show up for this.
Definitely. And I think it's important to recognize too, on that life stressor scale, it's things that are obviously stressful and maybe more negative in nature, but It's also the positive things. Getting married is generally a happy thing, but it's still stressful. Having a baby is generally a happy thing, but it's still stressful. So it's not just the negative stuff that happens in life that might promote or facilitate a real estate transaction. It's also the good stuff. And so to just be aware of that and how that might be affecting you is really important. So therapy can certainly help recognize if there's any adverse effects from good stuff that happens. Yeah.
So a lot of times, like these good things and moving, like it's a transition of usually multiple hits on your list, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about how much. I mean, you guys have bought and sold homes. That takes a lot of time. It's a disruptor. Can you talk about maybe some skills that our clients can take to like have a more productive day and like add this added stress and time?
Yeah. Yeah. You're so right. It's so much time. It's so much preparation. It can be very draining. And I think on a very basic level, it's really important to not forget to do the little things. And what I mean by that is kind of like basic self-care around you need to be sleeping, you need to be eating, you need to be exercising, you need to have downtime. Those are the things that we find slip early on in the process. They're easy to just shove to the background and deal with the stressor at hand. So remaining steadfast in those self-care practices is incredibly important, and making time for those, not neglecting them. So I think that's the biggest thing, kind of most easiest and obvious thing to tackle. But other things that you might recommend.
No, I really like your take on self-care there. And self-care can be like fairly, misunderstood. People hear like self-care and they're like, spa day, let's go. And
There's nothing wrong with that.
but
I would be French fries.
yeah, or French versus right. So it can be, relaxation or self-soothing can be part of that, but it really is like, what are the things that help you be like well constituted and in good order, right? How can I be in the best emotional shape to take on, like the next stressful step in this? And there's a lot of research in mental health that says like positive emotion is the best thing to help counteract negative emotion, right? If I'm already feeling decent going into it, the ups and downs are a little easier to take. So, but yeah. I mean, the skills are numerous, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy does a lot of it's really saying like what we think or how we interpret what's happening to us really means everything, right? And it's a little bit mind blowing sometimes. We go over with people in therapy. We're like, objectively speaking, nothing in life is good or bad, and they're like, no way. It's like, no, it's just something that's happening, right? Like what you make of it is really kind of what modulates that.
Right.
And it's something that isn't really talked a lot about societally, but people tend to learn in therapy.
Yeah, it's just kind of playing off that idea. Part of what CBT would teach is, how are you interpreting the process of buying the home? If the thought process is, this is so stressful, I can't do this is going to be a disaster, and you're taking that kind of catastrophic look at it, well, you're going to feel those emotions. So CBT would teach to kind of take a more objective approach. Let's really look at the situation and examine some counter arguments to those beliefs. Let's create a narrative that's more realistic, more objective. And what we find is that helps tone down the stressful emotions. So it's very counterintuitive for us as humans. We tend to just believe what we think, and we tend to go negative in our thinking. So it takes a little bit of time and practice and consistency to learn how to see situations differently and interpret them as more objective.
Yep. I've been a therapist for 15 years and I'm still working on it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's a while.
Kelly, wouldn't you say though, like when people come to us, a lot of times they've been through an open house, or there's like a significant trigger. They're going like 0 to 100 right away. Would you agree?
Yeah. Well, and I was, as you two were talking, I was thinking about this a little bit more, and typically the transaction lasts about 30 days, sometimes 60 days. And so those stressors might be magnified during that time frame. But the research shows that people start looking for a home 9 months in advance of when they actually end up at that open house or reach out to one of us. So my question is if people are starting at 9 months in advance before they reach out to us, are there some things they could be looking for that might be indicating that they're experiencing stress or anxiety, and then say, should I call a therapist right now before I'm at the open house and under contract and things seem really stressful?
Yeah. I think some of the big signs to look for is is there impairment going on in their world? So what I mean by that is, they're feeling stressed, but maybe they can't show up to work like they used to. They're distracted, they can't concentrate. Those are little indicators. Maybe there's some impairment in relationships. They're so stressed that they're snapping at their partner, and now there's more conflict. They're neglecting self-care. That could be a little indicator. So if
There
it
is
is
more French fries.
the French fries, yes, donuts, French fries, junk food. Yeah, their eating habits have shifted. Yeah, that could be an indicator. So other little subtle signs.
Yeah. You covered a lot of the big ones. I was thinking like sleep disruption is a big thing, right? When we tend to do this thing, it can become a little obsessive, right? But it's like when we have a problem or something that's uncertain, like where am I going to move or is this going to work out? We tend to just like comb it over again and again in our minds. And sometimes we do that just thinking like, well, if I go over it like an 18th time, maybe I'll get an answer, but it tends not to go that way. Right. So that or just the kind of stress or tension can keep people up at night. It could be bodily tension as well. Right. The mind body connection's just kind of inseparable. And sometimes people just, we've definitely had clients that are like, I feel it here. I get this knot in my shoulder, and right when it's getting the best of me.
Physical illness.
That could even be, I mean, it could play hand in hand. They might be scrolling Zillow because they can't sleep because of the give out movement. Right. That might be an indicator, like I'm feeling my time distracted at the middle of the night scrolling Zillow, and maybe I should reach out to a therapist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you're not healthy to look at building plans at 3 a.m. is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Last week for a friend. So what are some healthy ways of dealing with like this roommate? Like, how do you turn it off?
Yeah. If we had a magic answer, I would certainly share it. That you can't necessarily stop your thoughts or stop the rumination from happening, but you can put some containment around it. So one of the more go-to techniques around this is called the thought corral. And basically what it means is you allow the rumination to happen, but you put it in a corral. You essentially designate times throughout the day that's 20 minutes where you are going to sit down and you are going to stew and you're going to obsess and you are going to just go for it as hard as you can. But when that 20 minutes is up, you do your best to mindfully attend to the other things in your day. So you put some containment around it, but you let your thoughts do what they want to do because there is no just turning it off.
So that was like, some people are really into time blocking.
Yeah.
This would be like adding an appointment on your calendar to like stress and worry.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it sounds funny, but that we a lot of people really do have success with that. And kind of the one of the other ways it works is like if you find yourself wanting to ruminate, you get to go, no, I have a place to do it later, right? It helps you kind of like delay because you're going to get to it. It can also be helpful too with like ruminative thinking is like a lot of people ruminating, they're looking for certainty, right? It's a very uncertain situation. I don't know where I'm going to move, when I'm going to move, how much it's going to cost. Is it going to work out? What's my house going to sell for? And you really can't get answers to those till you get there. So instead of like trying to figure that out in like a really certain terms, it's probably better to ask like, well, how would I cope if something I feared is happening? What's one small thing I can do today to move towards that goal, right? A lot of things aren't solvable. Like I said, it's a 30-day, 60-day process, right? But what's one thing I can do to move this forward today? And that kind of helps people and gives them some of the power back. Like, hey, I'm a little more capable at dealing with this than maybe I'm giving myself credit.
Sure. Yeah. Actionable steps. Yeah, definitely.
So I heard some like themes and I kind of like sum it up as like maybe control being like a big reason to have like stress and anxiety.
Oh, yes.
Would you find that true?
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Yeah. We as humans love control. We're control enthusiasts. And when we don't have that, we feel very out of sorts. And so there's a concept in therapy and in the literature called uncertainty tolerance. Instead of driving for control and getting control, that's not always possible. So what we have to do is learn to tolerate the uncertainty. We need to build a thicker skin around not having control because much of life is out of our control. So you do that in little ways. You practice being out of control and accepting it, tolerating it, not necessarily enjoying it, but you are just being present with that sensation. And the more you do that, the more you tend to desensitize to the fear of being out of control. So you hang out with the uncertainty, you make friends with it, and all of a sudden you're able to take on a lot more in terms of being out of control than you previously were.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, being out of control kind of puts a pit in my stomach and I don't feel good about it. And I don't know that I can sit with it indefinitely, but could I sit with it for 10 minutes, right? Could I practice getting used to that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like exercise, doing repetitions of it. And one day you're stronger. Same thing with your ability to tolerate just those feelings of not having control.
Well said.
Kelly, what do you think about like our buying and selling process that we do to help kind of eliminate or really reduce this need to like control, and really how do you as a professional help guide that and reduce stress and anxiety around this topic?
Well, I think it all comes down to time and preparation. So in our industry, like Blake said, sometimes people think they want something at a very quick pace, or want to, for instance, just go see the house before they've maybe sat down and had a conversation with us as realtors, or they want to get their house on the market next week without analyzing all the data. And so I think that all comes down to preparation. So one of the things we do, for instance, with buyers, is when we meet with them, we go through a detailed process that asks very specific questions that have been developed over time, to help really define what they're looking for, really help to understand what their control triggers are. That's what I'm going to call it. That's probably not a real term. But so often they're trying to control this process. And what we have is homes that don't really fit those boundaries of that criteria. And so we have to really help guide them into what will really work. A particular technique that I like a lot in the process that we use is with couples, or two buying parties, whether they're married or not, that we go through a process of asking them what their top priorities are in the home, having them star the things that are most important to them, and then talking about that together, and having each partner identify their most important things. The reason that this becomes really important with couples is that a lot of times there's a party that isn't as vocal or is willing to cede that power to the other person. And where this comes up is they try to regain that control or power later in the process if we haven't discussed it, by saying, I always wanted a house and have to have a house with a tub that they've never talked about before. And then we're kind of back to square one after we've been looking at homes for 2 or 3 months. So would you say that's
I would agree. And there's no such thing as a perfect house. So I think like setting expectations is interesting. Statistics show if it's like 80-ish% of what is in the home is what you want, then you should be happy for a nominal amount of time. That's like a normal time.
5 to 7 years usually.
So let's talk about like power dynamics and like couples. Because a lot of times there's always like a third, either another vested party or a third party. So maybe like a child's buying their first home. Well, it's the child's home, but the parents are doing the down payment. Or two people are coming together, maybe getting married, getting engaged. Money is not equitable or equal, I think is actually a better word. Or maybe parents are selling, not parents are selling, maybe like children that are selling their parents' home.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dynamics there. So what are some ways what can we do as realtors to help facilitate? So not therapists or something like that. Very scary. Yeah. But like a lot of times like conversations hit in the moment and there really is no time to like call you two to be like, help me.
Yeah.
So what are some things that we could be aware of?
Not to mention we don't have them on retainer.
No shame or
We could set up like a bat signal situation, right? You guys really do, I imagine, just run into like you guys are just like amateur couples therapists all of a sudden, right? Like these dynamics just suddenly play out under stress, and that's how mental health dynamics tend to go in general, right? It's like something that's there and like the couple's generally kind of getting away with, like stress kind of brings it out and brings it to the forefront. I loved about hearing about your process of like how you actually sit down and get ahead of this. Maybe you learned that from experience.
Learned the hard way.
But yeah, like a little bit. This is a huge part. Like we talk about this in CBT is like one of the things that can generate a lot of like just negative thinking and negative emotion is like having unmet expectations. And we have expectations about everything, whether we realize it or not, right? So you guys do a great job of just eliciting that right through your natural experiences. And I would recommend to, whether it be you guys facilitating this with a third party to the transaction, or if it's just a couple, taking care of this too. But it's like, how do you bring as many of those expectations as possible out in the open, right? Run through some what ifs. How's it going to feel, right? If you make this down payment, how's it going to feel to receive this down payment? Does that create a hierarchical relationship or a power differential? Yeah.
Yeah. And in the moment, it's so tricky when you see it playing out and there hasn't been time to prep for it. You guys might have to do a little refereeing in these conversations and, very politely and gently tell one party to, pipe down a little bit so another party can speak. So that's a tricky thing to do, but you guys with your professionalism, like I'm sure you're fine. But yeah, it might be actually encouraging a party to be a little more quiet and, asking some more direct questions of somebody who's being quiet or not bringing their needs to the forefront.
A huge thing that we help people with in therapy for all sorts of reasons is assertiveness training, right? There are lots of people that just have trouble. And, we hear the term assertive, but it's like, what does that really mean? And it's like, it's asking for what you want or need in a way that respects how I feel and the way the other person feels, right? No one's getting stepped on, in other words. And it can be really difficult. Again, this could be another dynamic that is kind of coming out under the stress. Anecdotally, I've had some clients where, the couple moves and one or the other feels really resentful, like after the fact, because they didn't feel heard. The house isn't actually what they want. And really no one feels good about it, right? The partner that did get what they want is going, well, I had no idea, right? So yeah,
I
so
had no idea about the bathtub.
about the bathtub,
Right.
is it always a bathtub?
Right.
Yes.
It's a fireplace. Okay.
Well, a lot of times couples will go into the home and they will split up.
Yeah.
A lot of these couples do not look at homes together like room by room. It's not this facilitated house centers experience. Right. People naturally go to what is most important to them.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I feel like Kelly and I, if we're going things together, we'll like, I don't want to say tag team, that sounds weird, but we'll split up
With that.
with that or we're like pinging back and forth while we're looking at homes to make sure that we're hearing both needs at once.
And also always having like a huddle outside of the house for everybody to talk about it. Like a deeper, to see about it. And then bring up the things that the bathtub, hey, this house didn't have a bathtub.
Sure.
How does everybody feel about that? You were talking about, being really specific about, like these power dynamics, especially when it comes to money. That's probably where we most often see it. There's also a lot of legal implications when money's changing hands, especially if a couple's not married. And so sometimes we encounter issues where people are very unsophisticated and with the legal issues that might come up with that, and find ourselves having to pull the non-power person aside and say, hey, these are some other things you might consider and you might talk to an attorney. It's awkward though. And the question for you is, how do we, you have the other party there that has the money. How do you kind of bring everybody together? What would you recommend in that scenario? Because I feel an obligation to protect the low power person, but the high power person has all the power and all the money.
Yeah. Oh, it's so hard. It kind of akin to family therapy or couples therapy and setting expectations at the outset. So before you guys even get into those discussions, what is the expectation? If there's going to be hard conversations that are happening, we're all going to have them together, or is it appropriate to be pulling people to the side? So setting up those parameters early on so that way people aren't surprised if you pull somebody off, or just getting everybody on the same page ahead of time of how those things are going to go is really important and can decrease conflict down the line when you're in those moments. Outside of that, yeah.
Yeah, no, and if you need to do it a little more on the fly, like Julie, you've done it up front, and if this helps either you two or anyone watching, right? This is the closest thing I have to a Jedi mind trick as a therapist. This is one of my favorite things, but they call it's like the courtesy and permission technique, and you give someone like the courtesy of like a little more difficult conversations coming, like you tell them that, you get their permission to have it with them, right? So that just looks like you might say to the couple, right, without feeling like you're splitting between either of them, like, hey, could I bring up a difficult dynamic that I'm maybe seeing between you two? And it creates a little curiosity because no one ever says no to it. They're like, well, I gotta know what it is. But if they say, yeah, that's okay. Like they gave you permission to have this conversation, which helps lower defensiveness as well. It's like, hey, you were consenting to this. I didn't just out of the blue go, hey, you need to pipe down and let them have their say, right?
Yeah.
I have like one final question because I think we're getting close to time, but like social norms and like the American dream involves purchasing a home. Homes are getting expensive. Generational wealth isn't really passing the same way it did. What would you, or how would you communicate like the pressure of home buying in terms of like your friend just bought a big, beautiful house. So like now you need to also socially purchase the big home. Like how would you define like what emotion is that, do you think? And like how would you
I think it has roots in comparing, and we live in a culture with social media where all you do all day is scroll on your phone and compare to other people. And you see your friends buying houses on social media, and it really makes you feel insufficient. It makes you feel like you're lacking. And so the comparison act itself is incredibly not helpful, but it's something that we very much do naturally as people. So to train that out of folks is a really hard thing to do. But I think we would take an approach of using that person's values, that person's path that they're on. What does their living experience in terms of their residence, what fits for them? Maybe it's not owning a home, and normalizing that there's different ways to do this, and that's okay, but it's their own unique journey and path. It doesn't matter what their college friends are doing at this point. Again, easier said than done, but yeah, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, people can do this with a lot of things, and it can be material possessions as well. But it's like hitting this milestone, having, so fancy of a house or a car or whatever it is. It's like sometimes we kind of conflate, like, that's what gives me value, right? And other people see that and approve of me of that. But realistically, that's not what gives people value. And I bring people back to that, like kind of ground them about. I'll just ask, like, why do people actually like you, right? Like what are those human and interpersonal qualities that attract people to you? And it's like, and it's never like, man, people just like me because, I'm dressed so well, or I have this house or whatever. And if that is the reason they liked you, that's pretty suspect, right? So it's like, these things don't define your value. It's just a thing. It's just a life milestone. Hit it on your own terms.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I was just kind of curious about, great question. Social and like people's expectations. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great learning more about how the two coincide. So just thank you for your time.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.